First speaker is Jonathan Nelson. Jonathan, welcome. It's good to see you again. And you're representing a number of people who have signed your card. Would you ask all 10 of them please rise? Those who have signed your card, they'll stand up. That's close enough for government work. Okay. Please state your name, address, and proceed with your comments. You have 10 minutes.
My name is John Nelson. I live at 4500 Westridge Avenue in Fort Worth 76116. In 2000, the city made a strong statement for inclusiveness by adding sexual orientation to its anti-discrimination ordinance. However, as with any city, there remains an underbelly, and the events of the Rainbow Lounge brought that to light. There has been much emotion. If you read the blogs on both sides, there has been a tremendous amount of name-calling on both sides. And what I'm going to say initially about how some people feel about the facts from the LGBT community is for the purpose of allowing you to know the level of emotion that exists. I wasn't going to do this, but I am. I think it's important for you to know what it's like. Many of you know me. I've been here for 30-something years. I love this city. And yet, even I am subject to demeaning caricatures. Some of you may know that I have represented and am representing a religious organization in regard to property, a property dispute in a Tarrant County courthouse. And this is an email that I received no, I didn't receive. The person that wrote that didn't have the courage to send it to me. This person decided to send this email to lawyers and professionals in this city. And this is what it said. The subject: how does John Nelson find time to sodomize his gay partner? With all of his interviewing in the gay press like the Dallas Voice, his active membership in local gay, lesbian, bi, and transsexual chamber, his proclivity for picking up rent boys at the Fort Worth Rainbow Lounge, and of course his true passion, trying to strip local churches of their houses of worship for disapproving of openly gay priests, you'd think Jonathan Nelson had superhuman abilities. Oh wait, it's all the meth and coke he puts up his nose. God bless such a hard-working fudge packer. That is what it can mean to be gay in Fort Worth. And that is why I'm going to discuss some of the initial reactions from the powers that be which caused us so much concern. The first reaction by the city's top police officer was made in a statement the evening of that Sunday. And that statement, couched as fact, related 3 supposed incidents where the officers were sexually accosted. And the chief of police went on to say, you're touched and advanced in certain ways by people inside the bar. That's offensive. And he went on to say, I'm happy with the restraint used when they were contacted that way. And this is the statement before any investigation was done. And from our standpoint, from reading them, it was our impression that decisions had already been made, that judgments had already been called. And although he called for an investigation, we wondered, after that statement, made as fact before any investigation, internal investigation would And that is not the forward way. Many believe, and believe today, that had it not been for the fact that this is a gay bar, that the inspection occurred on the 40th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, beginning the gay rights movement, had it not been for the fact that a young man suffered a brain injury, and had it not been for the fact that this incident has received so much national and even international attention, had it not been for all of those things coming together, the Chief of Police's prejudgment would have been the end of it. Just take a deep breath. And that's not the forward way. Instead of acknowledging that there were two different stories, and because there were two different stories, that in and of itself necessitated an investigation, and leading it that way, that's not the impression that was left that Sunday afternoon. When we read that statement, and we heard the public officials, upon learning that this incident had happened, and before any investigation had taken place, when we heard the response of those in public places was, "The police do a good job," you can understand the frustration. And you can understand the disappointment. I believe that this police department does a good job, and that those who wear the uniform try to serve and protect us.
Yes, sir.
But that belief does not create a presumption that everything was okay at the Rainbow Lounge.
That's right.
It does not, because that's not the forward way. Some believe that had it not been for citizens who got together on a Monday morning, both straight and gay, and decided to write a letter calling for an independent investigation, and had it not been two state elected officials within our community and two members of city council joining in that, some believe that there would never have been a call for such an investigation. And that is not the forward. And more recently, just the other day in the Dallas Morning News, here is what I read, a quote supposedly from a top elected official in this city. Quote, "It might have been helpful if the owner of the lounge had informed the officers that this day was more than just another day of the week." And you know, I thought to myself, what would that conversation have sounded? Officer, if you're inclined to be kind of overly aggressive, or if you're inclined to not follow the policies and procedures set out in writing for both you and the TABC, if that's your goal, you need to understand it's the 40th anniversary. That's not. So, where do we go? I tell you the things that I have told you so that you understand the anger and frustration that exists and the validity of that if you are gay. That's why I tell you that. But we can't stop here. It's not enough to protest. It's not enough to scream. It's not enough to interrupt. Because the face becomes more important than the message. And we cannot let that happen here today or ever. Here's what I think this city needs to begin doing. And some of it I understand has begun. First, diversity training be a citywide priority, not just with the police department. And that process be conducted by those outside the departments who have the knowledge and expertise in that area. Second, there be an active police presence for the the safety of our community where we socialize and congregate. Next, that the city's attitude not just be get along to get ahead. That this city, its leadership, embrace and promote the LGBT community and every minority community in a meaningful way. I'll go on. Next, there be LGBT liaisons between the city and our community to work openly and cooperatively to deal with issues like this so that we can prevent them, not just react to them. And finally, an independent investigation. I understand full well that this city council and its mayor have called for an independent investigation. But I tell you this, if that investigation is just a review, meaning that someone or someone sit in a room and review the files, that is not an independent investigation. To me, whether it's by the city, which has an ordinance, which it can do, or the Civil Rights Division, or the U.S. Attorney's Office, if that organization determines that there are still questions to be answered, that institution or organization, whether it be the U.S. Attorney's Office or a citizen group, have subpoena power, have the power to revisit the witnesses and the officers. And I'll tell you what, this is not just a question of who, what, where, why, and how. It is proper, appropriate, and vital to ask these kinds of questions of the officers. Have you ever met a gay? Have you ever been to a gay bar? What do you think about it? And why is it necessary? Because a boy died on a fence in Wyoming because of attitude. And I will tell you that every action that is a hate crime exists because of that individual's attitude. And that's why those questions are vital. As you can imagine, Fairness Fort Worth was formed out of distrust, out of anger and frustration. But quickly we understood that those emotions we had to put aside. Initially, Fairness Fort Worth was formed to facilitate the interview process with witnesses, to encourage those witnesses to come forward and meet with the police department and TABC and their agencies in cooperation. Because the more people who come forward, the more accurate the results are going to be. And then this group decided that it would try to form, and it's only 2 weeks old. I mean, that's the reality. But the reality is this: we bear some responsibility for this. We've never had a gay community, a gay spokesman, an LGBT representative. And that's on our shoulders, what we do now. And what we are saying is we're here to cooperate. We're here to care. We're here to listen. We're here to understand, and we're here to work with you. And all of those here who support Fairness Fort Worth, would you stand up? I have one more sentence. Robert F. Kennedy said this: Some people see things as they are and say why. I dream things that have never been and say why not. And so my question tonight, at this moment, at this time, for these reasons is, Fort Worth, why not?
And while I extended an additional few minutes, I think that you waited, you're entitled, and I'm going to go back to kind of strict enforcement of the rules. See if we can work our way through this, because we've got a lot of speakers. And the next speaker is Tom Hannibal. Tom, you are also scheduled for 10 minutes. Would you have the 10 people that you're representing please stand? Close enough for government work? Okay. Please state your name, address, and proceed
My
with
name
your
is
comments.
Thomas R. Hannibal. I'm a certified public accountant. My address is 4200 South Hewlin, number 603. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Prior to June 27th, I was engaged by the owner of the Rainbow Lounge to provide tax and accounting services. I arrived at the lounge at about 11:25 on Saturday evening, June 27th, to observe the operations and establish procedures and collect information to begin my bookkeeping processes. I walked the entire bar between 11:25 and 1 a.m. I stood behind each register. I went in the office. I observed the crowd and the patrons. I observed no problem patrons. No one appeared intoxicated to me. No one was unruly or acting in an unsafe or outrageous manner. It was a quiet, calm, fun crowd from my observation. At 1:05 a.m. Sunday morning, now June 28th, I was on the upper area of the bar, visiting with some friends. A few feet to my left, I heard raised voices, turned and saw the first state police officer in a khaki shirt with two Fort Worth police officers arresting a young man 3 feet from me. I heard the young man say, "I've only had one drink out of my first beer." They told him he was under arrest for public intoxication, handcuffed him with zip ties, and the two Fort Worth police officers roughly pushed him to the crowd towards the door. As they left the bar area, the upper area, I noticed there was 3 other officers doing something similar to another young man. I went over and asked the head of security what was going on. He said, "I don't know." I said, "Go find out." He left. He came back and told me that he was, asked the officers what was going on, told him he was head of security. They told him to make himself scarce. I told him, "Don't do that. Go find the owner and send him over here." I'm standing here watching this. I don't have a clue what's going on. The owner comes over and I say, "Mr. Schrock, go outside, ask for the officer in charge, ask him what's going on and why these arrests are occurring on your premises." I watched him go out the door. Less than 30 seconds, he's back in. He walked up to me and said, "Tom, they told me to go back inside or they would arrest me." I then moved from the upper bar down to the lower area and stood there where I could observe the whole bar. While I did not see the first entrance of the officers through the crowd, I stood here for the next 35 minutes and taking notes on my BlackBerry and observing the time. I watched the officers come into the bar 20 more times. Not once during those 20 entrances did anyone in the crowd touch them, grope them, or drive them. These were uniformed officers and other officers that said state police with flak jackets and guns and badges. Their protocol seemed to be coming in the door in groups of 3, either 1 TABC and 2 Fort Worth, or vice versa. They would spread through the crowd, tap one on the shoulder, say you're under arrest for public intoxication, handcuff them, and roughly take them out of the bar. This went on until 1:40. At 1:40, a TABC officer came in the bar and arrested a young man 4 feet from me. The young man said, "You can't arrest me, I'm drinking water." The officer grabbed his wrist, spun him around, and slammed him into the pool table very hard. He was a TABC agent, I learned later. He then zip-tied him, called for other officers. 2 Fort Worth police officers came into the bar, picked him up off the pool table, and carried him out with his feet dangling. Those 3 officers returned in just a few moments. That TBAC officer walked straight to the bar, walked near where I was standing, and tapped Chad Gibson on the shoulder. At that point, Mr. Gibson turned. I was too far, about 12 feet away. I could not hear him, but I could see him mouth the words to the officer, "Why?" There was always at least, they were in perfect profile to me from where I was standing. There was at least 18 inches of space between them. And I can tell you, Chad Gibson never broke that officer. Can you imagine after 40 minutes and 20 arrests for a young man that weighed less than 150 pounds to grope a 6'3", 240-pound officer in full of the entire bar would have been absurd. I observed the officer grab Chad's hand, twist it, turn him around, grab his collar, and drag him off that step. He took 2 steps and slammed him into the wall. I can tell you from where I was standing, Chad never touched the officer. He never disrespected the officer in any type of manner. It lasted less than 8 seconds before the officer arrested him, and there was no resistance from Mr. Gibson. After he had him pinned to the wall, he called for assistance. He stepped back. He then turned and threw him very hard on the floor. 4 other police officers ran in. 1 TABC and 3 Fort Worth police officers ran in. And the photo you have seen that I saw that night as I stepped to leave the bar was Mr. Gibson lying face down, 2 officers on each side of him with their knees on him, the TABC officer who arrested him standing straddling, looking at the camera. And I left the bar. I stood and observed the activities of that evening from 1:05 until 1:46. What I saw was not what Police Hall stated at his press conference on Monday, June 29th. When I read the police report, it was not only half truth at best, but more serious than that, it had outright false statements. I overheard 8 arrests. I observed 20 people taken out in handcuffs. And when I left the bar, there were 8 or 9 people still handcuffed, laying face down on the sidewalk. I went home. I took a swim. I sat down and made 2 pages of notes. Sunday afternoon, I got up and wrote an email to you, Mr. Mayor. I outlined to you what I saw and asked for a phone call. I've never received one. I signed a letter requesting an outside investigation based on the press conference and the police report I read. I contacted State Representative Charlie Guerin and shared my story. Within 45 minutes, Alan Steen of the TABC had called me. 5 minutes later, Andy Payne made an appointment to be in my office the next day, and the TABC internal affairs investigation was opened. In closing, I did not just leave the Rainbow Lounge that night while abandoning my professional responsibilities to my client. I fled in fear. Thank you.
Chris Tucker.